This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Team Top Cat Sales. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan QB John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to TopCatTeamSales.com. That's TopCatTeamSales.com. Also, follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Your weekly dose of Detroit sports content, now available for download. Thank you for listening to episode 159 on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz?
Dude, we got a jam-packed show today. When we're sitting there going over the rundown, I was like, I don't know how we're going to fit all these topics in, but you know what? It's magic. We just do it. We just do it. We just show up, open up the mics, and we just do it.
Which surprises me that we got guys on this network that turn on the mic and go about 30 minutes. I'm like, come on, man. I was like, okay, the show comes in at 30 minutes, 34 minutes for some of the hosts on this network. And I go, my goodness, we got to kind of cut out some of the stuff we're doing. We turn on the mics and we could almost talk for 2.5 hours about a wide range of topics. So, hey, that's all you can do is just turn on the mics, do the best that you can, prepare, and try to do the best podcast that you can possibly do. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I feel good. It's a good week. I'm feeling good. I'm really excited that now in terms of the NFL, we're at preseason game number 3. A little bit better look at what the Detroit Lions are going to do and across the NFL. I really enjoyed Tuesday night. I got a chance to sit and watch Hard Knocks, a great series, one of my favorite series on HBO. And then on right after that, they aired a great Real Sports talking about women reporters and things like that, and also talking about Ray Carruth and what he did. It was just a great sports night on Tuesday. The Tigers won. I'm feeling good. Football's upon us. Another podcast to record. What else could I ask for? I'm pretty happy.
Michigan State right around the corner as well. We're going to cover some Lions, of course. We've got to touch on some comments that Ken Holland made that has the Red Wing fan base irritated. We'll do that in Jock Jams. We'll also touch on a little bit of Tigers. We're going to kind of put them on the back burner here. I know that the season's wrapping up and we're kind of coming to an end here, and it's going to get close whether or not they make the playoffs, but we're going to take a little bit of a break there because football is right around the corner, and it's going to be very heavy football the next couple weeks. So we're going to kick this show off with some Michigan State.
Let's start with this. You saw it. I saw it. The AP poll came out over the weekend, and we saw that Michigan State came in at number 12, and Michigan came in at number 7. But the thing that surprised a lot of people was somebody, and I'm not sure if the name has been revealed, somebody threw in a number 1 ranked vote for Michigan in the AP. So I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know how. I'm maybe kind of surprised that Michigan even got in at number 7. I think, don't you think they would slot in a little bit better, maybe 10 to 15, knowing that they got a first-year guy and knowing that the competition in the Big Ten is a little bit stronger? Why do you think initially that Michigan was ranked higher than Michigan State?
Well, if you look at what Michigan's bringing back this year, they basically have their offensive line minus Graham Glasgow back. They've got a ton of weapons on the outside. Their defense, they're bringing a lot of starters back. They're bringing back a guy like Jordan Lewis, who by all accounts is going to be a top 10 draft pick if he stays healthy and makes it through the NFL Combine. You've got an athletic guy with Jabril Peppers, and there's been a lot of hype about him going into this season. So you factor all this in, you're right. They don't have a quarterback, and that's probably the big sticking point. That's probably why they weren't in the top 5, is they don't have, and nobody's really sure who that starting quarterback's going to be. But you return a bunch of starters. It's year 2 now under Jim Harbaugh. The hype machine has been rolling seamlessly, endlessly here. I mean, I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm kind of tired of the hype machine. It kind of makes sense. And when you sit there and you look at what's going on with Michigan State lost quite a few pieces. They went to the NFL. You're right. They have a fifth-year starter for quarterback here with Tyler O'Connor. That's nice. That's good to see. And we're going to kind of delve into that a little bit here coming up. But it just seems like Michigan has more pieces. It has more big play potential. And I think that's partially the reason why they're seated in the top 10 of the AP poll.
So, yeah, you would think that, okay, maybe a lot of it has to do with Jim Harbaugh, the fact that a lot of people have high respect for the fact that, hey, this is a coach that coached in the Super Bowl. Now you look at San Francisco once he left, they're basically now in the toilet. And so he really wasn't fired, in essence, that he kind of just wore out his welcome. His contract was up, and he was just said, okay, hey, we're going in a different direction. We're not going to renew the contract, and you can go take the job that maybe, like everyone thinks, is his dream job. But a guy like Jim Harbaugh is being widely respected, and he is doing what he can to elevate the Michigan program. But don't you think that if you're going to go by the coaching at this point in time, that you would give more respect to Mark Dantonio based upon what he's done now in the last 6 years? Don't you think then maybe that when Michigan State fans go, are we being disrespected? Do we have a right to feel that way? And if you were going to rank based upon coaching, don't you think then it should have been maybe flipped and Michigan State should have been ranked 7 and Michigan 12?
If you're a Michigan State fan, I think you have an absolute bone to pick. And I'm not going to tell you that you don't. The issue, I think, comes into play is with the pieces that are going to surround Tyler O'Connor, what his offensive and his defensive lines are going to look like. I mean, again, like I said, you lost a lot of big play guys on both sides of the ball there, and that really hurts a team going into the season. You're not really sure what you have. Do I think Michigan State has a great shot to catapult up the rankings? And again, these are just rankings. What's going to end up happening and deciding everything is what they do on the field. You have a great coach with Mark Dantonio, an absolute stud. But going into this season, you're doing things with a sophomore running back who looked like an absolute savage last year. You've got a fifth-year starter as your quarterback, which is great. What's going on with that offensive line? What's going on with the defensive line? What kind of weapons do you have on the offensive side of the ball that are spread out wide? Some question marks right there. What do you have going on with that back seven for Michigan State? Again, more question marks. I think there's more question marks on Michigan State on both offensive and the defensive side of the ball, and that's why they sit there and they get ranked number 12. I don't think it's a slap in the face. I just think you're just kind of looking at it and you're like, well, they lost a lot of big play potential on both ends of the ball there. So do they deserve to be ranked in the top 10? And at this point, no. I think that they're a much better team than an Ole Miss team that's ranked ahead of them. And I think they might be better than a Tennessee team who's ranked ahead of them. But that all remains to be seen. We'll figure all this out within the first 3 weeks of the season once college football gets underway here.
Now you're looking at the schedule. You're seeing how Michigan and Michigan State are going to shake out early in the season. And ahead of their epic clash in East Lansing, there's a lot of talk that Michigan's schedule is kind of soft. And going into that game in East Lansing, their ranking probably is going to shoot up initially in the season. And they're probably going to enter that game maybe 1 or 2 in the country. So that bodes well for Michigan State if they can get through their first big test going on the road versus Notre Dame, second game of the season. You'd think, okay, that's a marquee game for them. Go out there, win that game, and maybe we could be looking at 2 undefeated teams in an epic showdown when they face off.
Let me ask you this real quick. Mm-hmm. Would Michigan's schedule look much tougher if they had a number 10 ranked Notre Dame on it?
Yeah.
If in week 2 they weren't playing UCF, they were playing right now number 10 ranked Notre Dame. It'd be a lot stronger, wouldn't it?
But don't you think the talk of adding Notre Dame to the Big Ten should just kind of fade away? Every year you hear...
I'm tired of hearing it. But my point is, again, if you go back a few years, you remember when Notre Dame basically glad-handed that envelope over and Michigan was left kind of holding the bag there because Notre Dame was like, yeah, we're going to end our rivalry with you and we're going to ride off into the sunset because this UCF game had to be put in after the fact. It was a filler game because they had an open spot on their schedule. So their schedule would look much tougher and be much more compelling if they were playing Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame should be in the Big Ten, but when you look at, their position being an independent school, their contract with NBC, they have a lot of reasons to be independent and take all the money for themselves and kind of find an easier path to get to the playoff because being an independent, you can kind of pick and choose your schedule and kind of go a cupcake route with a 1 and 2 loss team because they all know. Everybody in college football know, you and I know sitting here, that Notre Dame brings a lot of
The
cachet.
Chicago Mafia, bro.
Exactly. They bring a lot of cachet, and so they're looked at favorably. And so for them, the easiest path to the college football playoff is maybe to be independent. So, yeah, I think that Notre Dame should be on the schedule for Michigan, but it's not. But Michigan State, going into that matchup, it's going to be very important that they both play well, they both establish their new quarterbacks, and do what they got to do going into that game. But just initially, do you think that Michigan is going to end the year ranked higher than Michigan State? Because a lot of talk now, people are maybe hesitant to say that Michigan's going to win or get into the college football playoff, but some fans, some media are like, hey, this is go time, and Michigan can pull the trigger and get to the college football playoff. So sitting here before the games start happening, do you think by the end of the year we'll be sitting here talking about a Michigan team that maybe finishes top 5 ahead of and finishes higher than Michigan State?
See, I don't know about top 5 because a lot's going to come down to that Ohio State game. A ton's going to come down to that Ohio State game for both Michigan and Michigan State. I can see Michigan finishing higher than Michigan State. We've seen something like this happen before where Michigan ended up going on to play in the Sugar Bowl. Did Michigan deserve to go play in that Sugar Bowl that year? No. Should Michigan State have? Probably. Was Michigan ranked ahead of Michigan State at that time? Absolutely. And it just the way it kind of worked out. I can see Michigan finishing ahead of Michigan State. I believe that Michigan is going to beat Michigan State this year. I firmly believe that. Going in, I think they're also going to take care of business with Iowa. Those are 2 of 3 games that you've pointed to a couple of times that these are the tough games. These are the games that they have to win. Their season is dependent on these games. The big question mark for me is the Ohio State game. You have to travel down to the Horseshoe, and you've got to take on Urban Meyer and Ohio State. Now, again, Ohio State will have had a whole season to prepare for that game, so they're going to look totally different than they look week 1, week 2, week 3, week 5 even. It's going to be a totally different game. Also, they have the most games played quarterback out of the big 3, which is Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State. They've got J.T. Barrett back, and the guy's an absolute stud. Let's not sit there and try to shine this any certain way. The guy's an absolute stud. He's a beast. He's dual threat. The guy can run. He can make plays throwing. He's an absolute athlete with the ball, and Michigan and Michigan State at certain times have struggled against athletic quarterbacks. It's just kind of what it is. So do I think Michigan can finish ahead of Michigan State? I do. Do I think Michigan's going to beat Michigan State? I do. And I think that's why they finish ahead of Michigan State come the end of the year.
There is a strong likelihood that Michigan's going to have a solid season just based upon their schedule. And you said it yourself, Michigan State has a lot of question marks. How are they going to handle the loss of 3/5 of their offensive line? How is the quarterback going to look? How is that defense going to shake out this year with the losses that they had to graduation and transfers and things like that? But I don't know if we've had this debate, and I think it might be time to set the scene and potentially talk about it. But you said it when we first started talking about this podcast, and I asked you, potentially maybe the media and those that are ranking in the AP poll have put Michigan ahead of Michigan State because of Jim Harbaugh. Well, I go now, okay, in totality, I'm looking at the success of Michigan State. I'm looking at what Mark Dantonio has been able to do to elevate that program. And now there's a natural rivalry between Michigan State and Michigan. You know it's there. I think it's time to have the debate. Is Mark Dantonio a better head football coach than Jim Harbaugh over there at Michigan? I'm going to sit here and tell you that right now, Jim Harbaugh is using his words, he's using his marketing, but when you start looking at the big game, whether he was at Stanford, whether it being coached in the Super Bowl, being outcoached by his brother, when you look at big games when he played Michigan State and Ohio State, I'm sitting here telling you today, Mark Dantonio is a better head football coach than Jim Harbaugh. And so I would say that based on that, based upon in-game management, how you recruit, how you handle, significant pressure moments, Mark Dantonio has many more notches on his belt in terms of high-quality resume building wins. So I'm sitting here today, and I might throw out a poll question on our Twitter page. Mark Dantonio is a better head football coach than Jim Harbaugh.
I can see that. I can see where you're coming from with that. Again, you have to remember Mark Dantonio has what I would deem a much larger quantity of work in a huge conference like the Big Ten. I don't consider the Pac-12 a large conference, especially when you're working at Stanford. I think there's limitations and you're kind of confined to what you have and what you can work with while you're working at Stanford. And if you look at the job that Jim Harbaugh has done while he was at Stanford, he did a great job. Absolute stud job there. He took a program that was in the doldrums, hardly existed, was just kind of a footnote for the Pac-12 and brought them up to play in a Rose Bowl, to sit there and brought them up to be competitive. They at certain times they were mentioned in the conversation for BCS championships. That being said, I need to see a little bit more from Jim Harbaugh before I'm willing to go and just rubber stamp him better than Mark Dantonio. I think Mark Dantonio is a stud. Absolutely. And this is something where you're not going to get much of an argument from me on what Mark Dantonio brings to the table, because I think he's a great coach. I think he's an absolute great coach. While Michigan was going through their lull there, when they had Rich Rod, when they had Brady Hoke, I sat there and I came on this podcast and I said, I wish we had a guy like Mark Dantonio. I wish we did. A guy who's a master motivator. He sits there in Michigan State plays its absolute best when they're doubted the most. When they are treated like they are second-class citizens, the team performs its absolute best. And it's a motivational tool that Mark Dantonio has instilled in these players, and they all show up with this giant chip on their shoulder, and it's great, and it's outstanding. Jim Harbaugh's a better recruiter than Mark Dantonio, and what ends up happening is you have better talent on the field, so in the long run, do I think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the better coach? Probably, because the talent that he recruits from is much better. It remains to be seen. It absolutely remains to be seen. Now, Michigan State has basically become quarterback central here, pumping quarterbacks out left and right. I think Jim Harbaugh's a QB whisperer. I mean, he's done great things with guys like Alex Smith, who nobody wanted. Great things with a guy like Colin Kaepernick, who look at where he's at now. A guy like Jake Rudock, who was basically going to be a bench warmer for Iowa, comes over to Michigan. Next thing you know, he's in the NFL, and most of you people want him to be your second quarterback on your Detroit Lions right now. So I think Jim Harbaugh can do a lot with a lot of talent, and I think he's got a great coaching acumen. I need to see a little bit more before I put him ahead of Mark Dantonio.
Yeah, exactly. And you just look at the game last year. Michigan was ahead versus Michigan State the majority of the game. And then you go, well, it wasn't it coaching that resulted in that gaffe that Michigan State, got to block the punt.
Horrible play. He sent everybody downfield, and you probably should have been having a max protect on.
And then you would say that in the second half, Michigan got ultra conservative and tried to kind of basically win the game running the football when Jake Rudock was pretty successful in the first half, and you went a little bit conservative when you break down the first half versus the second half for Michigan. And so that, in my mind, comes to coaching. And so Michigan and Jim Harbaugh has a lot to prove in terms of ranking Jim Harbaugh versus Mark Dantonio because of his success and things like that. But do you feel at some point that Jim Harbaugh will usurp Mark Dantonio and maybe get a national title? And because here's the expectation for Michigan. Michigan, and everybody knows it, has supreme high goals. And the university is at a place.
Jim Harbaugh will tell you about him.
Jim Harbaugh will tell you all about it.
He'll tell you about him.
The university is obviously the top class in football, the University of Michigan. They're up there with the elites like USC and Texas and the storied programs in all of college football. I think still Michigan's now still the winningest program in all of college football. I still believe they still have that title. But, and you'll check it while I talk about this, but Michigan, their goals are not really to compete with the likes of Michigan State. Their goals are to win national titles, to get to the level like Alabama was. They were dormant for a long time until they got their Jesus in khakis, Nick Saban. And so now Alabama is perennially, year in, year out, a squad that you go, look, we don't even know who they've turned over, and they're ranked number one. And that's because of Nick Saban and the reputation that Alabama built. That's what Michigan's goals are. Looking at it now, are you starting to get that, hype train rolling, believing in it, that Michigan will not only be competitive in the Big Ten, but year in, year out be national title contenders? That's the goal.
Michigan has the most wins by any college football program by 29 victories over Texas, who is number 2. Do I believe Michigan will become a perennial power, will become and be mentioned in the likes of Alabama, the way Florida used to be mentioned, the way Clemson is now being mentioned? Yes, I do. I absolutely believe that. I think that in due time, Michigan will become one of the powers again that is mentioned in that top 4, top 5, top 6 teams that will sit there and compete for a playoff and will play for a national championship. Do I think it's going to be this year? No, I don't. You've got too much to figure out. Again, we still don't know who your quarterback is. This is the one good thing that you can say about Michigan State. At least they know who their quarterback is going into the season. Michigan, we have no idea yet. you've got different things that you still have to iron out. You've got a brand new defensive coordinator that's come in. Now, he's been an absolute stud everywhere he's gone, and you have a defense that's returning a lot of pieces. And this is going to be a very blitz-heavy defense. And in the Big Ten, where it's kind of the haves and the have-nots, you've got probably about 4 or 5 teams who have a legitimate shot at winning the Big Ten championship, and you're going to beat up on everybody else. That blitzing defense is going to cause a lot of problems, especially for new quarterbacks, fresh faces that are out there. They're going to be scared because they're going to be under so much distress. You've got a lot of different pieces that are still in motion for this team. So I don't believe that they're going to contend for a national championship this year. Not next year, but maybe the year after, year 4 of the Harbaugh regime. I can see it. And it'll be interesting to see how the team comes around and how it's built up and who stays, who goes, and what we're kind of working with here. Who kind of takes the reins as the quarterback? Does that offensive and defensive line still stay stout and sturdy? Is it almost a call to arms here, going back in the day to when Michigan had guys like Hutchinson, Backus? Because honestly, guys, as much as you hate him when he was a Lion, he was great in college. You know, that offensive line was probably one of the best the Big Ten has ever seen. Does he still continue to build the team that way? Do they figure out their running game? Because the running game was absolutely abysmal last year. You know, you've got a lot of guys coming back that were in the same scheme and are making their second go-around here this season with Michigan as their running backs. Hopefully they can get some things ironed out, and hopefully they look a lot better. But yes, I do believe Michigan will be mentioned in the powers, and I do believe Michigan will be winning a national championship very shortly. The thing that bothers me the most is that Michigan and Michigan State have to cannibalize each other in order for one of them to get there, which is a total bummer because I would love to see these two schools sit there and match up against each other for the championship. I think it would be great. That was one of the interesting things the BCS could do. And I absolutely hated the BCS, but it was one of the interesting things the BCS could do for you. And that's when you had, I believe it was Alabama versus LSU, and both schools from the SEC, and they sat there and they took each other on. It was interesting to see that, you know. So it'd be nice to be able to see something like that where you could have Michigan and Michigan State sit there and play for all the marbles. It'd be great, but they've got to eat each other in order to get there.
Okay, and so now these next 2 upcoming seasons for Michigan State are going to be a telltale sign as to how Mark Dantonio is going to run this program, because they've had seasons where they've taken a step back, but they've kind of regrouped, and you've had pretty much solid transitions going from Kirk Cousins to Connor Cook, and now you're going to have Tyler O'Connor, who was named starter, and I'm going to be interested and fascinated to see what this season can produce, because Jason kind of said something that's very interesting in that this year, who would you be more surprised if they got to the college football playoff, Michigan or Michigan State? And I think the honest truth is I'd be more surprised if Michigan State got there because they have a first-year quarterback. They lost a little bit more than Michigan did. And the expectation now is that Michigan State's going to have a transition year and they're going to fall off. If you look at it, if things fall right, if they can get that victory early on versus Notre Dame, then you could say maybe you get some momentum, you use that defense, and hey, maybe you have a situation where you can have a special year when nobody expected it. But these next 2 years for Mark Dantonio are going to be very important because the train's coming. That Michigan train and Jim Harbaugh, they're not stopping. They're going above and beyond what anybody expects. And so Michigan State and Mark Dantonio have to do a great job recruiting. They got to continue to get good guys, and they have to have strong seasons because Michigan State is looking for respect. They've done a lot, but Michigan, they just get to the college football playoff this year. It might dwarf all the coverage, all the success that Michigan State has had. And so I want to see Mark Dantonio continue this level of success for Michigan State. I'm so hoping he can do it. And by announcing Tyler O'Connor being the starting quarterback, I'm pretty happy and satisfied, being that he's had experience. He's played versus Ohio State. He's followed up Connor Cook, and he's been able to watch and learn, and he's got a little bit of experience in terms of being a senior quarterback. So I'm pretty happy with that, being that Tyler O'Connor is going to be the starter. I think he's going to do okay. I think he's going to come in and have a solid first year, and what makes a good quarterback is having a decent line and having great running game. And I do think that can be provided for Tyler O'Connor to kind of ease up. But, hey, he's going to be tested pretty quick, and he's got to go there on the road to Notre Dame and do some damage quickly.
You know, I really like that Mark Dantonio has come out and already named his starting quarterback. It kind of takes the guesswork out. It gives Tyler O'Connor a little bit more time to get comfortable, get into rhythm, kind of feel his way through this season. You know, you're not setting him up to fail, because nothing is worse than when you're a starting quarterback and you feel like you've got a short leash. It's come out. You are now our guy. We trust you. We believe in you. You know, if you go back and you look at Tyler O'Connor's stats from last season, in the limited time that he played, he didn't play horribly. You know, he has a pretty solid completion percentage. He has 13 completions on 24 attempts, about 55% there. It's not horrible. It's not great. You know, 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He has a passer rating near 120. This is good. This is a good foundation to build off of. And giving a fifth-year senior, he's got all the respect of all the guys in the locker room. I'm assuming, things do get a little bit weird there in Michigan State when quarterbacks aren't named captain, but I don't believe that we're going to see a 2012 season where Michigan State takes a big step back. There may be some regression. There may be, because you have a quarterback who, like you said, it's his first time really going underneath center and taking all the snaps. He'd come in and he'd play some spot duty last season. He had helped out with a big win against Ohio State. Again, he didn't take all the snaps in that game, which was weird, but it worked out for Michigan State. I don't think you're going to have a huge regression, though. I think there may be a small step back, but I think Michigan State has put itself in a prime spot with what it does on the offensive and defensive line, whether we know what we have going in or not. You've got a guy like an LJ Scott who can run the ball like an absolute animal, like an absolute beast. And that's going to take a huge load off that quarterback. It's going to allow him a little bit more time to sit there and understand the playbook, digest it, be able to sit there and really perform, because now you have a running back who is going to take a huge load off of you. And that's going to help out a lot on that offensive side of the ball.
Quick 50 votes already into our poll. Who's the better head coach, Mark Dantonio, Jim Harbaugh? Where do you think the votes lied? What percentages do you think? Quick 50 votes.
I'm going to say it's heavily favored toward, maybe not heavily favored. I'm going to say it's favored towards Michigan. I'm going to say probably 65-35.
Higher, 75-25.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 50 votes in quickly. But I extended the poll, so I'm going to retweet it out during the Tigers game and things like that. I extended it out. Most polls that I run will be a day, but this one, because it's more meaningful, I extended it out to 2 days.
More meaningful.
It's a good poll. I think it's a good discussion to have.
It's a very good poll.
It's a good discussion to have because a lot of people do believe Jim Harbaugh is the better coach, but Mark Dantonio has had more success. So it'll be interesting to see how Michigan State handles now being one of the targeted teams, because when you get to the college football playoff, you've now elevated yourself a little bit. How high or how much you've elevated yourself, that's debatable. But you do know now that Michigan State's on the map. People do have expectations for them. They are being ranked highly year in, year out. And it's up to Mark Dantonio to continue this wave of success, because Michigan State's not a team that's known for continually having year in, year out top level success. But they're getting there. They're slowly building that resume. Having 3 straight years finishing in the top 10 is awesome. And top 5 finishes, great bowl wins, getting to the college football playoff first before Michigan. All great things for Michigan State. Nobody's decommitted this week, so that's a good sign.
Michigan. Let me ask you this real quick. Did it surprise you at all that Michigan was able to sit there and come out with 10 wins last season in Jim Harbaugh's first go-round as Michigan head coach? Because it shocked me a little bit. That loss to Michigan State and then just getting manhandled by Ohio State absolutely crushed me. I was like, they have to win this bowl game in order to be considered a decent season, because the expectations and the goals had changed. Going into the season, I believe I had them winning 8 games, including their bowl game. And as they continue to play, they lost that game to Utah, which was devastating, and I was very upset. But they then got on a little bit of a roll. They sat there, blew the game against Michigan State, and then they just got trucked by Ohio State. And going into that bowl game against Florida, I said to myself, they have to win this game. If they don't win this game, the whole season was a waste, and it was a loss, and it was pointless. And they were able to sit there and find a way to win 10 games. And I think it becomes a very successful season that I myself, like I said, expectations did change, but I myself going into the season did not expect them to come away with 10 victories.
And so it goes back to a little bit before Jim Harbaugh, and something that, as a Sparty fan, I naturally thought it was going to be 6-7 wins just because Brady Hoke was such a bad head coach, and the level of consistency just wasn't there for Michigan. But when you look back at it now, a year later, and you go, what allowed Jim Harbaugh to get to 10 wins? You go, you know what? Brady Hoke was able to recruit.
He was a good recruiter.
He was a good recruiter.
Absolute shit as a head coach.
That's what happened. He was able to get the talent there, but what happened was they would basically show up as a 4-star, end up being a 2-star. And so when you have that, when you come into Michigan and nobody progresses and everybody maybe regresses, then you go, oh, okay, this is what led to Brady Hoke being dismissed finally. After all the sayings and all the, the jokes and stuff like that, Brady Hoke was dismissed because, in essence, he wasn't able to take the talent that he had and elevate them. And so what did Jim Harbaugh do? He got a great quarterback in there that was just perfect for him at the right time. He could manage the game, and he had some experience. So it wasn't like Jake Rudock was just some young bumpkin. He played Big Ten football before. So he was able to take the talent that was already there, add his, little spice to it, and was able to kind of bring back what Michigan was known for, running the football, being a little bit conservative, keeping, everything under wraps and playing to your strengths. And he was a little bit better of an in-game manager than Brady Hoke was. Brady Hoke, we would just joke about how awful he was not wearing a headset, how befuddled he looked on the sideline. Jim Harbaugh doesn't do that. He's professional. He'd watch what was going on, and you knew that Jim Harbaugh at least had a better sense and a better feel as to how to manage a game than Brady Hoke, and that's why you got the 10 wins.
Brady Hoke, the equivalent of your chubby, befuddled uncle who's just kind of goofy and makes you laugh all the time right around Thanksgiving. Jim Harbaugh, your ultra-aggressive, angry dad who works down at the plant, comes home every day, wants his six-pack, and wants to be left alone. Just don't touch his recliner. He's going to sit down and watch TV. Just leave him alone.
So now, did you have any concern this week for Michigan, knowing that 3 people have decommitted in the past 2 days? And the story regarding Aubrey Solomon is just really kind of interesting to look at, because do you really decommit from Michigan based upon a little gaffe? I thought that in general, if you're 19, do you really care so much that you get a letter saying that you went to a barbecue that you really didn't go to? I could understand the name misspelling a little bit more, but I worry more about that stuff now in my mid-30s. I'm more crotchety, and I want my shit done right. If I pay for something, I want it done right. If you send me a letter with my name on it wrong, I'm like, what the hell is this, being in my mid-30s? But at 19, 18, I thought I was, for me, a little bit more carefree. But if Aubrey Solomon is the kind of kid that's like, show me the love, and why are you getting my mom's name wrong? Why are you getting my name wrong? Are you really then looking at other guys, and that's why you decommit? Some people are just saying, listen, don't believe the hype and the facade that he decommitted because of this mistake that he probably just had in his mind that, in 2017, I believe is the recruiting year he's in, that he just really wanted to go somewhere else. But on Michigan's end, if you're in Michigan, you got to step up, grad assistants. If you're going to work for Jim Harbaugh, that's what you're going to do? Come on now, step it up. You can't be sending out letters to people with their name wrong. And, hey, take attendance. If they're at the barbecue, make sure you send out the thank you card. If they're not there, don't send the letter. What are you doing over there at Michigan?
I think it speaks to a bigger issue that's going on with Michigan right now. And this has a lot to do with that hype, that train that runs around Jim Harbaugh. He's always on, scale goes 1 to 10. He's always on a 15. And he's always going a million miles a minute. And sometimes when you do that, you get a little bit sloppy in what you do. And I think some of that sloppiness from Jim Harbaugh has trickled down into the recruiting. And you're seeing that because now you have back-to-back days where commits are just decommitting left and right. And, Jim Harbaugh doesn't stand for sloppiness on the field. Why is he going to stand for sloppiness, with the recruiting? So this is an issue I think it will get rectified. I think it'll get figured out. As far as Aubrey Solomon goes, I'm not sure if he wanted to go somewhere else or not. He says he's going to sit there and reopen his looking for which school he wants to commit to. I mean, the guy is he's a top 5 ranked offensive lineman. Number 1, he's 61st ranked prospect by most recruiting programs here. So the kid's a stud, right? Let's be honest. He's a stud. Whether or not he goes to Michigan or doesn't, the mailing gaffe being what it was, I don't know. I just think that the mailing issue, sending him a thank you note for something he didn't attend to, speaks to a bigger issue that's running through Michigan right now. And I just think it results in sloppiness, whether it's coming from the head coach or it's just something that's going on with the recruiting and some of the, like you said, the grad assistants that are sitting there helping out. Things have to be figured out. Things have to get tightened up. And I believe that they will. I think going into year 3 under Jim Harbaugh, you'll see less mistakes and you'll see less things get done like this.
I just want to ask you before we get to the, Jock Jams and end this segment, very good segment talking about college football and the differences between Michigan and Michigan State. Do you think back in the day when you were like 16 to 18, if you were an athlete and you were going to be recruited, would you want to be recruited like, the movie, He's Got Game with Ray Allen, where they send you to the school and they show you the best party and the good time and the women and all that hype and circumstance and all that kind of stuff? Or do you feel like you would have been, listen, I'm strictly about my role there. Am I going to be the guy? Am I going to be, starting my freshman year? Am I going to be someone that's going to get a chance to go to the NFL? Do you think you would have got caught up in recruiting if you were highly touted and things like that? I feel like I would have definitely took a lot of trips if I was going to be recruited and maybe a little bit of both, but I would have definitely enjoyed going to some parties.
Oh, you don't say.
I would have loved Michigan State. I would have been like, I hear there's some good stuff around here. Let's go. Show me something.
Would you have took a duffel bag full of money?
Would have taken some money. That might have swayed me a little bit if every school was going to dip in and try it. I'd see who would throw out the most. I might not have taken it. I might have just said, how much would you be willing to give me? And just compare to see how much they would throw out there, but not probably take it. I definitely would have maybe swayed 5%, because remember, this is not my 37-year-old self. This is my 19-year-old, or this is my 17-year-old self. I might have been swayed 55-45 versus who showed me a better time, who gave me the steak dinners, who paraded me in the nice vehicle, who let me hang out with the coach in the film room longer, stuff like that, as opposed to my position and stuff like that.
If I was highly touted, I would have took all the trips in the world I could have took, and I would have enjoyed all the parties I could have enjoyed. It would have came down to two for me, though, because as a child, I had two teams that I really liked a lot, and it was Notre Dame and it was Michigan. And at that point in my life, when I was an 18-year-old, 17-year-old high school student wrapping up my senior year or my junior year, whatever it was, I probably would have went to Michigan no matter what. But I would have sat there and enjoyed every last bit of it.
And that's why I bring up the question, in that you imagine now you're Mark Dantonio, you're Jim Harbaugh, you're an older dude, and your job is to basically cater to 16 to 18-year-olds, trying to get them to come to your program. How do you put yourself in that mindset and stay relatively sane? Because the new wave athlete, it's all about, hey, I'm telling you.
Is Jim Harbaugh sane, though? You have come onto this show numerous times and been like, Jim Harbaugh is an absolute maniac.
Which I have to do my research and look, but I'm really shocked Jim Harbaugh doesn't have a Snapchat. Because
I'm sure he does.
I mean, he might have a Snapchat. Look that up. I think he might have a Snapchat and start doing some snapping. Because imagine that now you're a mid-50s guy, and your job is to recruit young kids to come to your program and shape them into men. It's a tough gig. The recruiting thing, when you look at articles about how hard it is to recruit, it's a nightmare. You got to try to keep up with the Joneses and understand what these young kids are thinking, and you got to develop a good level of respect and reputation so that these kids will come to you. And that's why some coaches take steps to kind of cheat a little bit and maybe throw out some funds or do some things that are unsavory to get these kids there. But I don't think I'd want that job. That's why I thought the NFL job is probably a way better situation. But Jim Harbaugh loves Michigan, and I can see why a lot of college coaches want to go play go coach in the NFL. It seems like it's an easier gig. You work harder maybe in the NFL. The pressure and the pot is a lot hotter, but I don't know if I want to recruit year round trying to get some young teenager to be impressed with me.
And that's the big difference between college and the professionals. College is basically 11 to 12 months you're on all the time. You maybe get a couple of days off, maybe a week off here and there where you can go spend it with your family. Whereas the pros, it's generally 9 months you're on, you get some time away, you come back refreshed, and you get right back to the grindstone.
Yeah, and so our coach never had to, put on pajamas to get some kid. They just want to come to Michigan State to win Rose Bowl titles. That's in my opinion. Maybe I don't know what's next for Jim Harbaugh. I'm trying to think now, maybe in the commercial break, what else he could try to do to recruit a kid that's going to be, not illegal, but, really weird. Maybe next is Snapchat, and he's
going to parachute in to camp. Just come flying down with a giant blue parachute, and it's got a giant Maze M on it and the Jumpman somewhere on there.
September's right around the corner. The first games in the fall are going to kick off, and Michigan State.
2 weeks away, bro. 2 weeks away. It's insane how close it is.
Yes, sir.
You can almost taste it.
Let's take a timeout, regroup, come back, and play a round of Jock Jams. I got 3 great questions lined up for you. I'm ready to get your takes on some certain things. And then we got to finish the podcast talking about the Detroit Lions on the Doc and Jock podcast. And you're listening to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Guys, it's more refreshing and cooler than that ice-cold beer while you sit there and mow the lawn? Definitely not you if you're running around in this heat, in that office, wearing that stuffy, smelly, pit-stained dress shirt that's wrinkled to the high heavens. Don't worry now. Uncle Jock's got you covered, or should I say Larry Hunt's got you covered, with their moisture-wicking, anti-odor, breathable 4-way stretch 100% cotton dress shirt that will keep you cool like the other side of the pillow. Look, guys, I've been wearing mine for some time now, and I absolutely love them. They keep me cool, dry, fresh-looking all day long, so I can handle some business during the day and then head out and tear up the night while still looking fresh and clean. On top of it, this is probably the best part. The shirt is made, designed, and crafted by Detroiters in Detroit. See all the incredible styles Lawrence Hunt has to offer? Head over to lawrencehuntfashion.com. That's lawrencehuntfashion.com. And if you use promo code DSP, guess what? We'll save you 20% off your order. That's right, 20%. If you don't believe me, listen to Detroit Tigers catcher James McCann.
I'm a jeans and boots kind of guy, and taking my wife out to eat, I love putting on my Lawrence Hunt dress shirt. The way they stretch, the way they feel, they move with my body just like a t-shirt would. I know that I'm wearing a dress shirt, but it really doesn't feel like it.
That's lawrencehuntfashion.com.
Yeah, we coming now. Come on. Yeah, that's right. We put it down. It's like a family in here, just a little disabled. Putting it down, we lay them out on the table. Yeah. Who's in the house? The brothers in the house. Gotta turn it on out, let you know what we about. Kinda like Cain and Abel, a bit unstable. Don't be breaking the brain, break the whole damn table.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys again for downloading episode 159 across the various platforms. We greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate all the sponsors that work with us to help keep this project on the air, the lights on in the Sterling Heights studios. It's always greatly appreciated. Yes, sir, cuz I got 3 great questions for you in what we call Jock Jams. I know for the better part of the last few months, we've talked about the Tigers and their woes and what it's like to follow a team that's basically a 500 squad. But they're dealing with a bunch of injuries. They're dealing with players that are slumping at bad times. And one of the biggest players, the guy that's been in the crosshairs the most, has been Justin Upton. Prior to his weekend versus Boston, he was really struggling. And a lot of people were like, oh boy, is this a contract that's going to haunt us now for the next 5 to 6 seasons? But he was sat down on August 19th, and he had an opportunity to sit, regroup a little bit, watch what's going on. He had that epic conversation with David Ortiz on Sunday. And what we've seen, what's this? This is the Justin Upton that's maybe made an adjustment. He's hitting the baseball, a massive game on Sunday. So in your opinion, after struggling for the beginning part of the year, what do you attribute this recent resurgence, and can maybe we start to say he's turned the corner and can keep this up?
Well, here's the deal. I'm going to give a lot of credit to you yourself and to a lot of the fans out there. Everybody was screaming that they need to sit Upton down. They need to give him a day off. He looks tired. He looks like he's struggling out there. Lo and behold, they give him a day off. It seems like he did some work there with the hitting coaches. He sat there, tightened up his swing. He was doing this thing. They talked about it on the Fox broadcast where he was kind of flaring his elbow out, keeps that elbow nice and tucked in, tight. Next thing you know, the guy's getting 6 RBI games. And basically, he's had 2 hits in the last, couple games that he's played in. So he's on a tear right now. I don't know if this tear is going to last, though. And this is probably one of those points in the season where we can say that he is helping to carry this team. This is something that we persecuted him for last week, where he was the one guy who at no point this season has helped carry a team. And right now, he's swinging the bat well. He looks a lot more patient at the plate as well. He's not swinging at bad pitches. It doesn't look like he's clutching his bat too tightly. I think this may be a little bit of a correction because, again, we've talked about it a couple times. The guy's like a 285 career hitter. He's hitting 230 right now. So you may see him get hot here for the next week or two, and that helps balance out that batting average. I think he's on the right track. I think he's worked on a lot of good things, and I think this is going to help even him out. Do I think he's going to sit there and have 6 RBI games going forward? No, I don't. I think he will be able to sit there and be a productive member of this lineup, and he will give you some at-bats, and he will get on base, and he will drive the ball out of the park now and again. But I think this is kind of the reclamation project of Justin Upton. I think he will help and contribute to this team going down as we get closer to playoffs.
It's very good, too, because we're playing Minnesota and the LA Angels of Anaheim, so it'll be very nice to kind of maybe get some wins versus teams that are lesser competition. No doubt about it, and Justin Upton can definitely help. It's nice to see.
And, you beat up on the bad teams, it really helps your confidence out a little bit, so that way you're feeling better. You work on a couple other things, and you just get everything kind of figured out and ironed out. And, again, you're not going to sit there and hit 500-600 for the rest of the season, but if you can sit there and you can hit 1 for 3, 1 for 4, back-to-back games, it's going to help you out. You're going to be right where you need to be.
As a follow-up, because you obviously soaked in the SEMO analysis of Justin Upton, what was your take on SEMO and Mario Mpemba together in the booth? Because a lot of people blew up our Twitter page like,
They don't like it.
You didn't like it?
Nobody likes it.
You like it?
It's all right. Here's the thing. SEMO's put in a spot where he doesn't usually do it a whole lot, right? And it's not that I don't not enjoy it. I just think he's got to iron some of the kinks out. The more and more he does it, I think he'll get better. Again, when he was sitting there and he's at the update desk with, whether it be with Matt Shepard or it'd be Mickey York or Justin White, whoever, he's very good at that role. I think the more and more he's in the booth, the better he'll get. Again, a lot of people didn't like Rod Allen when Rod Allen first started. Everybody hated him. A lot of people hate Kirk Gibson. My mom can't stand him. She tells me all the time. My stepdad's the same way. He loves Gibby when he played, loves Gibby, outside, but he just can't handle hearing him for 9 innings because he just sounds tired all the time. So it's just one of those things. I think the more and more he does it, the better he'll get.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying, like, man, did you take some speed before the game? My goodness, it was like, blah, 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 blah. But I think as the game wore on, you saw that he got a little bit more comfortable. And he's done it before, but I think that's his MO, is that he starts off strong. He's got to kind of chill out a little bit.
You got to remember, too, he's got to have so much adrenaline running through him because when you get put in a spot like that, you're usually amped, you're hyped, you're excited because you get to do something that you love and that you want to do, and it's new. You remember that first time you were with a girl. It was new. Your heart was beating 1,000 miles a minute. You didn't know what you were going to do. You thought you were going to explode right there. It's the same thing, It's like that's like his new girl. He's just trying to sit there and kind of calm it down a little bit. Now, in this advanced age, you've been with plenty of women, maybe not you, but me, plenty of women, and it's just kind of what it is. Like, hey, girl, what's up? How you doing? And that's it.
Gotcha. Somebody else that also needs to tone it down a little bit is Red Wings general manager Kenny Holland. My goodness, he's become, kind of a Debbie Downer kind of personality. In an interview with NHL.com writer Dan Rosen, Red Wings general manager came out and was kind of candid and said that there's basically only 5 or 6 teams right now in the NHL that are legitimate Stanley Cup contenders, and that the Wings weren't one of them. And he also was a little bit uncomplimentary and a little bit making some comments that were negative towards some of the players on the squad, discussing, I think it was Nyquist, and saying that, hey, once he got his big fat deal, that, hey, he kind of, that might have been a contributing factor as to why he regressed and why he hasn't put the puck in the net so much. I've never really heard that from a general manager before, kind of directly calling out a player in an interview with an NHL.com writer. What was your takeaway from the fact that Kenny Holland is a little bit negative towards the Wings, their chances, and some of the players on the team? How should I react to this?
All right, so there are 2 ways you can react to this. All right, in both of them are correct. Not one of them is wrong, because I had both these reactions as I was reading through this article. Initially, I was pissed. I was very upset. I was like, are you serious? I was like, you put this team together. If we're not a cup contender, what the hell are you doing? Why are you sitting on your hands? You're the one who signs all these guys to all these shit contracts. Figure it out, bro. Let's go. There have been numerous times where we've been screaming to the high heavens about them going out and either signing guys that would be a much better fit for this team or going out and getting guys that will sit there and help contribute, whether it be through a trade or free agency. And this is the team that you put out there. And now you're going to come and tell me that the team that you've helped build isn't one of the 5 or 6 best teams to win a Stanley Cup? You're somewhere in that range of 20 where you have kind of a shot, but not really a shot. So I was initially upset. And then the more and more I read through this, and you've seen him touch on Gus Nyquist there. You've seen him touch on guys like Dylan Larkin and kind of what Franz Nielsen will bring to this team and how they can sit there and help stem the aging tide with guys like Henrik Zetterberg and Nicholas Kronwall. And the more and more I read it, I was like, well, Ken Holland's like that old man. He just doesn't care anymore. He's just going to tell you exactly how it is, and whether you like it or not, you got to deal with it. And I like the fact that he's not sugarcoating it. He's letting you know, hey, I've not done a good enough job to make us one of the 5 or 6 premier teams in the NHL right now. However, we are on the heels. We're one of those 20 teams that are behind those 5 or 6 teams. We're not the very worst. We're not the very best. We're somewhere in the middle. We've got some young talent that has yet to reach its prime. And a guy like Gus Nyquist, yeah, we were disappointed in his production last year. He got a contract. It seemed like he got fat and sassy. So he kind of calls him out and says, hey, we expect more from you. And I like that. I like that from the general manager coming in and saying, hey, we want more out of you. Where I got a little bit confused in this article was when he started talking about Blashill and how he expects great things from Blashill because he's had success everywhere. And last year wasn't really a fresh start because Babcock had been there for 10 years prior, and going into this year, it's going to be more of a fresh start for everybody because Blashill's there for year number 2. Well, when you get rid of that dictator, that's your fresh start. Blashill's fresh start was last year. And I agree that him getting another year underneath his belt, knowing what to expect, coming in, being able to handle players and handle guys that he maybe hasn't coached while they were in Grand Rapids is a big help for him. I kind of got lost with the whole fresh start thing, and I didn't really understand it. Now, again, be upset if you want that Ken Holland hasn't put together a top 5 or 6 team to contend for a Stanley Cup, but I think you can rest assured and be happy that Ken Holland is very matter-of-fact about it and knows where this team is at and knows what he has to add to it to make it one of those 5 or 6 teams to be a legit Stanley Cup contender. And also, I like the fact that he has called players out and he is demanding more of his guys. Guys like Dylan Larkin, he wants more out of them. Guys like Gus Nyquist, he wants more out of them, and I like that.
Man, it was just when you read it on paper, you're like, oh man, going into the season, you don't think we have a chance? Why am I going to invest any money in your team?
Oh, don't worry. There was a link so you can buy tickets right underneath.
Yeah, exactly.
Which made no sense.
A little bit of PR. My goodness. Maybe we could be in the top 10, maybe just outside of it. My goodness. But he's been candid. And, hey, you've got to remember, less is more. Let's just hope they go out there and score a couple goals and make it an entertaining, enjoyable experience when you go out to the Joe.
Really and truly,
less is more.
It is, and I don't want to sidetrack the Jock Jams, but this team really needs to add some help on the blue line. They need to get a defender. If they can go out there and, I don't know, somehow make a trade, or maybe they have a defender who comes back. Cronwell's knee is supposed to be a lot better, so maybe he can return a little bit to form. I just think he's way too old at this point. I think he has too many miles on those legs, but we need some help on the defensive end, whether it be a puck-moving defender or a guy who has a big shot back there, something, because our defense looks putrid.
So the Olympics are over. I barely watched any of it, and I guess I was one of the I was like the majority of people.
You're a millennial, huh?
I was a millennial, which is being blamed. Us millennials are being blamed for the epic tank in ratings for NBC. And when you make an investment in the billions and you get those numbers, the bean counters are going to be looking like, oh boy, what did we do here? How do we repackage what the hell was these 2016 Olympics? Because the numbers are way down compared to 2012 in London, even though there were some great storylines with Michael Phelps, the gymnasts, the swimmers, a lot of great stories, Usain Bolt. A lot of interesting stories, but in the end, the second week of the Olympics was taken over by Ryan Lochte and his boneheaded, going out, getting drunk, and then making claims that he was, robbed and things like that. So that took over a lot of attention, but it didn't draw ratings in terms of people watching, and some people, thought it was maybe due to not showing a lot of the primetime events live, whether it was the kind of the way that it was presented to millennials. Whatever the reasons was, it just, for me, I told you beforehand when it started, the negative connotation of the Olympics, the IOC, the fact that a lot of Rio and Brazil could use some financial help more than a bunch of billion-dollar stadiums was a little bit some of the reasons why the Olympic shine has gone away for me. But for you, what was your takeaway? Because you have more of a personal tie to Brazil.
A couple different things here. The one thing that really stood out to me was that Brazil, and more specifically Rio, didn't screw it up. With the opening ceremony, I thought the opening ceremony was great. I thought the closing ceremony was even better, especially as they sat there and introduced Tokyo into the whole mix with the whole Super Mario theme that they had going on. I thought that was absolutely great and incredible. They did a very good job with limited resources. They didn't have a lot of money, so putting on a huge performance, they really couldn't do that. But they did a great job using a projector where they would sit there and shine it down onto the floor, and it was incredible. The way that they did it and the way that they utilized it was outstanding. Michael Phelps and Usain Bolt, can they please come back for 2020? Honestly, because two of the best athletes we've ever seen. And they look like they can do it again. They look like they could come back in 4 more years and be just as dominant and compete at a high level and still win gold medals. And every time that they come on TV, it's much-watch TV. You have to stop what you're doing and you have to watch. I don't care if you're a millennial or not. The gymnast, the different things that went on with the gymnast I thought were great. I loved Katie Ledecky. She's a swimmer. I love how she sat there and she called out the one chick from Russia. And I loved the cockiness, the arrogance of her. I thought it was great. I seriously, it was refreshing to see a young girl be so cocksure of herself and be like, you know what? I do it right. You do it wrong. Go kick rocks. watch me win. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Ryan Lochte's a boob. If we could lock him away somewhere where he can just go be like, bruh, dude, I just peed on stuff and broke stuff and I was held up at gunpoint. Whatevs. Like if that guy could just go away, it'd be great. It'd be outstanding. Those were probably my big takeaways, my huge takeaways. I enjoyed the Olympics. I didn't watch it as much as I probably cared to or maybe should have. I did enjoy the beach volleyball, the women's beach volleyball, and I did enjoy the indoor volleyball. A lot of hot chicks, so that's always good. That's always like a staple of the Summer Olympics is watching the hot chicks play beach volleyball and indoor volleyball. It's always a bonus for me. And when I say bonus, I mean bone.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a good time for me, man.
It was good. I did, like I said, I didn't watch too many of it. I definitely like the recaps. That's what I like to do. Read the stories and read the storylines in the papers and stuff like that. But just visually, in terms of other stuff, I was focused in on the Lions and Tigers and other stuff like that. So the Olympic experience, and I kind of felt like what a lot of people felt like. I felt like Ryan Seacrest was kind of forced on me. He's not naturally that engaging yet in terms of what he did in the Olympics versus other guys in the past. I thought Bob Costas, he opened the Olympics with a great feature on Michael Phelps, and I thought they probably needed to do more of that. But for me, I just wasn't a fan of Ryan Seacrest and what they did in the studio and anything like that.
Do you think
at
that
all.
was how they maybe tried to tie millennials over? Like,
Yeah.
Ryan Seacrest from such things as the Kardashians, such things as, what was the show he used to do? Got Talent or whatever it was. I don't know.
American Idol.
Yeah, that one. Whatever. Ryan Seacrest, boob.
No.
Again, him and Ryan Lochte.
Okay, no Olympic.
The Ryans.
So no
That'd be a great show.
No Olympic
Dude, think
talk.
about it. The Ryans on NBC. It's Ryan Lochte and Ryan Seacrest. Oh, this would be magic.
So likely no Olympic talk until episode 500 of this podcast in 4 years.
That's right.
No doubt about it.
Oh no, we got the Winter Olympics coming up.
Okay.
Hockey's good.
There you go.
I enjoy the hockey and I enjoy curling.
All right. Great round of Jock Jams, sir. Now let's take another timeout. Our last one of this podcast. Come back and we'll finish the podcast talking about the Detroit Lions, thoughts on preseason game 2, and what we expect in their third preseason game versus Baltimore. Doc and Jock, episode 159.
Doc and Jock here for Fanatic U. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you love your Detroit teams, and I mean you really love your Detroit teams, you got to check out fanaticu.com and get the coolest gear out there and rock your Red Wings shirt, rock your Lions shirt, rock your Piston apparel. Wear it till the wheels fall off. Michigan State, you know what? They got it too. Check out Fanatic U. They have 6 locations all over Metro Detroit. Check them out, fanaticu.com.
All right, sir. Look at that. Another play. Dan Orlovsky's throwing the ball to another team. What do you know? Dan Orlovsky, ultra professional, ultra consistent. And what are you going to do, man?
Ultra consistently bad.
No kidding, man. 12-year veteran, still with the Lions. And I guess to start the segment off talking about preseason game 2, one of the takeaways was, my goodness, Jake Rudock probably doesn't have to do a whole heck of a lot to lock up that number 2 spot. And I'm thinking and I'm hearing the whispers that it's likely this year the Lions are going to keep 3 quarterbacks on their roster, which is different than what they did in 2015.
It would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, you're not getting a whole lot out of Dan Orlovsky right now. I praise the guy because he's a good teammate. The guys in the locker room like him. He was part of that 0-16 team. He was the guy who ran out of the end zone. That's what his claim to fame is.
And you know what I don't like?
He owns that, though.
Yes, he
does.
does.
He owns it. Like, he's like, I'm that guy. That's me. So the fact that he owns it and he's got the cojones and the stones to say, yeah, I screwed up. That's me. It's what it is. And he laughs about it. He's a good dude.
He is a good dude. What I don't like...
You're not good on the field, bro.
What I don't like is when somebody else does it, like a Cody Kessler in Cleveland, then all the announcers are like, oh, he pulled a Dan Orlovsky. That guy's on our team. Dang it, I don't want to be used as fodder for laughter when another guy makes the same mistake. And of course, the Cleveland guy does it in preseason when it doesn't count. You got to remember, Dan Orlovsky did that in a regular season game. And I think that's one of the highlights that, really marked the 0-16 season was him running out of the end zone there. Oh, that was horrible.
Was it Jared Allen sitting there chasing him out? Oh, it's so bad.
I still have the paper where it's him, I think, walking off the field
Like this.
in Green Bay when the Lions lost to officially go 0-16, man. Ugh. But listen, I'm starting to now turn the tide again because it was heightened this week with New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick coming out and going, he was asked like, hey, it's preseason game 3. Are you really going to show a lot more compared to an NFL game? He's like, seriously? You're going to ask me that? He's like, no. He's like, this is the closest to an NFL game, but it's nowhere near what an NFL game looks like. And he said it bluntly. And then again, it's been talked about because the Dallas quarterback that's playing well right now, Dak Prescott, everyone's like, oh, he's great. And they're like, he's played the most vanilla defenses, no blitzes, no exotic schemes. They used all the big football words. And I'm like, basically, they just said that the defenses that Dak has been up against hasn't been shit in essence. He hasn't seen nothing. They're just standing there playing and he's throwing the ball around. So he hasn't seen nothing. And so I'm like, okay, I can see why now. You know,
He does look like a stud, though.
and versus nothing.
Well,
Everyone's saying
what does Dan Orlovsky look like against nothing?
yeah, well, that's why I think people are so down on him, why the fans were booing so much in game 2.
And I
is
applaud
that-
those fans. Be upset. Let them know how you feel.
Exactly. And if you think that the Lions fans are going to be him-ho positive all the time, you got to remember, now it's one playoff win in 59 years. Forget about it. You have an angry fan base. Right now, it's being a little bit fueled by the ticket a little bit because if you just listen to them, and we listen to sports radio a lot, ever since they lost the Lions the Lions rights, yeah, it's been like this. The Lions suck. The Lions are just the worst organization ever. Pat Caputo tweeted out, Dan Orlovsky might be the worst quarterback in NFL history. So there's a little bit of a heightened sense of hyperbole going on over there. They are bad. Let's not sugarcoat it. The Lions are bad, but not epically bad like the ticket is putting them out to be. I think they have a chance this year to start off realistically 8-8, 9-7. Maybe if things go right with that offense and you are injury free, you could be 10-6. So I'm kind of being a little bit excited before they start playing. And I'm sure once I start watching game 1 where they throw the ball all over the place and make all the mistakes and they suck, that I'll be back on the Lions suck again in 4 or 5 wins like Vinny said. But my thoughts on preseason game 2 were you just need to kind of shore up those mistakes on the offensive line. You got to have guys play better. And my biggest takeaway is I'm starting to get the little bit of doubt and a little bit of worry that I'm not so certain Matt Stafford's going to make it all 16 games with that kind of offensive line and what defenses can do to you nowadays. If you don't shore that up, you got to remember you're playing vanilla defenses and vanilla offenses. If you can't guard versus guys that are maybe not as trying as hard, Taylor Decker whiffed again. Cole Wick got Stafford crunched and lost the football. I'm starting to get a little bit of doubt that Stafford is going to go 16 games this year with the line playing the way they are.
Yeah, that offensive line has looked abysmal, to put it nicely. And you're right. Taylor Decker has not performed as well as I think we had expected or had hoped. There have been numerous plays where he's just looked out of place, looked a tad slow. He also has made some really good plays. It's kind of a mixed bag with Decker right now, and he needs to be more consistent. I think that's the big issue with Decker right now is he's not consistent. Now, Riley Reif, on the other hand, has looked great at right tackle. I think we both agree Riley Reif has found his spot. He deserves to be a right tackle. He looks good. Cole Wick, I'm a little bit more lenient with Cole Wick because he's not your starting tight end. Going into the season, I have no plans on him being your starting tight end. I think he's a good rotational player.
He might not make the team.
Well, that's something I think we'll touch on here. We'll discuss. You're asking this guy to kind of step in and basically play the part of Brandon Pettigrew, play the part of Eric Ebron, any other tight end who's a blocking tight end on this team. You're asking him to do that, and he looks out of place and he looks a tad slow. It looks like that's something that he's not used to doing either. And you're right. I don't know if Matt Stafford is going to be able to make it 16 games. It's a huge worry. And this goes back to why I wanted them to go out and get a guy like a Nick Foles. Bring in a quarterback who has started games, who knows what he's doing, because we've touched on Dan Orlovsky. You don't want him starting games. Jake Rudock, I don't know if he's going to be caught up to speed enough to be able to sit there and start games and be able to take over games. The last thing you want is for Matt Stafford at this point in his career to get David Carr syndrome, where he hears guys breathing heavy down his neck and he just kind of crumbles and tucks the ball and falls on it and hopes he doesn't give it up. And that's kind of where this offensive line might get him. It's going to be a tough, rocky road for this season because this offensive line does not look productive enough yet. They don't look cohesive enough. And this brings me to the next topic we want to talk about. Is there anybody on this roster right now or on this depth chart that should maybe be moved up because the veterans aren't getting it done? I mean, we've talked about Dan Orlovsky at length. I think both of us agree Jake Rudock should probably be your number 2. And going into preseason game number 3, I would love to see him come out right after Matt Stafford gets done because I'd like to see what he can do against a little bit of a better defense. I don't want to see Dan Orlovsky again. I know what he's going to give you. I know. There's nothing you can show me that's going to change my mind on what I know he's going to give me. A guy like a Cole Wick, he shows flashes at times. For being a rookie, he's a guy I'd like to take a chance on. I like to keep on this roster. He's a guy I would not like to lose. I think he needs to shore up what he's doing on the offensive line, but he makes catches, makes big plays in the middle of the field when you need him. He's not afraid to get hit. He just has to shore up his blocking because it's not been very good. Taylor Decker is what it is. That's going to be a year-long battle that we're going to have to watch, and hopefully he gets better as he gets into game 8, as he gets into game 12, as he goes into game 16. He's got to get better each and every game.
Yeah, one of the positions that we're all looking at is left offensive tackle. Now, that's the spot that ideally you want Taylor Decker to start, but right now listed on the FoxSports.com depth chart, you got at the left tackle spot, you got Taylor Decker, number 1, Cornelius Lucas, number 2. And in the 2015 season, he was kind of shuffled from left to right. He kind of settled into the position at the right side last year. But now if you're going to have Riley Reif there, Cornelius Lucas could do the job maybe, and watch for him in Game 3 versus Baltimore. If Taylor Decker does some things like he's been doing, then you might see, a situation where he doesn't end up being the starting left offensive tackle. Maybe you might see Cornelius Lucas take over that spot, because they have depth there at the offensive line. They have competition, which is what Bob Quinn wanted to do, is to establish competition all across the positions. So you might see some changes quickly in terms of when the guys start the year versus how they end the year. But one of the positions you got to look at is Taylor Decker and the quarterback position, like you said.
Do you think Lucas ends up pushing out Decker by game 3? That it's not working. It's not working fast enough, maybe. I think Decker will be a good left tackle, maybe not this year, maybe next year and the year after that, once he kind of gets more acclimated and adjusted. But do you see a point in the season where Lucas comes in and pushes him out, and Decker's basically your rotational offensive lineman?
Taylor Decker should improve throughout the year. That's why I'm kind of interested to see how the final depth chart kind of plays out, where he may not start the year at the left side, and he may be a guy that comes in off the bench and maybe earns that position halfway through the year. Because you got to remember, if he continues to whiff on plays, how do you justify putting him out there? I mean, you're expected to cover Matthew Stafford's blind side. If you make a significant mistake, one big mistake, Matthew Stafford's out. And everyone has said that the Lions season will be over if he's out. So Taylor Decker's got to do a much better job. And so I'm not so certain he might even end up being the starter when the year begins. But to answer your question, I don't think so. I think that Taylor Decker is going to be given an opportunity. I think the Lions will let him start and maybe at least work until the bye week to see if there's any big time problems. Because by all accounts, you need to develop. And if you're investing a ton in Laken Tomlinson and Taylor Decker in the first round draft and linemen, you got to give him a chance. Another guy that's got to step it up, Laken's kind of been average to me, in my opinion. He hasn't done anything to make him worthy of being a first round draft pick. And I'm like, oh boy, I know that's maybe the thing we should ask ourselves is, are we judging harshly when a guy struggles in the preseason? Because when they do well, you're like, okay, good. Matthew Stafford survives the game. Good job. Are you supposed to criticize a guy if he struggles in preseason? Because I know it's vanilla, but if you're struggling in basically practice, it's going to probably carry over to the season, don't you think? Naturally thinking?
You would think. I mean, the way I look at preseason games, they're like organized scrimmages. You're going to sit there, you're going to go out there, and you're going to challenge a guy who's kind of competing for a job, and he probably has been penciled in for his position. So you got to go out there and you just got to try to keep your quarterback clean. That's your job. Don't get hurt, keep your quarterback clean. That's what you're trying to do as a offensive lineman. And you're right. Laken Tomlinson hasn't showed me anything. I don't like what I see from him. Again, I hated that pick when they made it. I never understood it. I feel like you can get a guard. A guard can be anything. It could be your guard could be a U center who doesn't fit the center role anymore. It could be a guy who's not a very good right tackle. It could be a guy who's not a very good left tackle. You just shuffle them inside. It's what it is. And they'll sit there and they'll fill the role. And generally, your left tackles that aren't very good anymore, that now play guard, are usually much better guards because they're used to playing that left tackle position or that right tackle position, which is a much more difficult position, and they tend to be a little bit more athletic. That's usually how I like to do it. But I never understood that pick. I felt like you reached for that guy. It just didn't make sense to me. Another place where there's a little bit of a logjam, where I'm nervous that they might actually cut some guys that they're going to regret, is at running back. I mean, you've got 7 guys who are all competing for jobs here, and Amir Abdullah's coming back. He's basically your starter at running back, which I don't know how you feel about it. I don't necessarily understand it. I think Theo Riddick would be a much better option for your starting running back. You've got Theo Riddick, a guy who we've both taken a huge liking to, Zach Zenner. Watching what he's done in the preseason, he deserves to be on this team, and I'm afraid he's going to get cut. Another guy who's the same way, Dwayne Washington, a guy that they drafted, a guy who has shown flashes, looks good on special teams. He might be on the outside looking in because you've got a guy like a Stephen Ridley who is familiar with Bob Quinn, was brought in by Bob Quinn, and looks to fill that role. On top of that, you got one of the only teams in the league to sit there and keep a fullback, Michael Burton.
Exactly, and so
that's your boy too, because he had all of 3 receptions or all three touches in a season, and whatever.
Yeah, and so
go back, find that podcast, watch me lose my mind.
You can't keep a guy like Zach Zenner because what's going to happen is if you cut him, he has to clear waivers in order for you to keep him and sign him on the practice squad, and he's not. So he's probably one of the guys that
George Wynn too.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that you could say, well, potentially could be gone. When you look at the tight end situation, Cole Wick is a fan favorite, but they signed Corliss. But right now, most people are thinking that he's got the edge. He didn't really play too much in preseason game 2, so he's going to probably showcase more against the Ravens. But he's going to be a guy that likely is going to potentially win out a competition versus Cole Wick. So I'm not so certain. Hey, if he keeps making plays, if he keeps scoring touchdowns, he's going to definitely make it a tough decision for him. But he might be a guy that might not make it. One of the wide receivers was trimmed down. Andre Caldwell, I believe, was cut and is no longer with the Detroit Lions. And another guy that I need to see step up in game 3 and do something is Curley. He's a guy that's been given opportunities, and when he's gotten a chance to get the ball, kind of has dropped it. I'm like, oh boy, that's not good. You were brought here to do some things, but one of his biggest question marks was his hands, and he's already dropped a couple in the preseason. So I know people are thinking that Rudock could overtake Dan Orlovsky, but do you think it's right for the Lions to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, being that, hey, we need guys to produce? So I'm thinking maybe a guy that should be cut that won't be is Dan Orlovsky. You're not paying him too much. He's not going to kill your cap. I would say, listen, do you really need Dan Orlovsky chiming into Matthew Stafford's ear, or do you need I saw the Periscope with Dan Orlovsky on the DetroitLions.com Periscope. I do watch those. Those are very interesting. Their questions are very vanilla. They're not even anywhere near anything interesting, but I do watch. And he said that, he accepts his role. Dan Orlovsky accepts his role as being a backup. He knows his job is to kind of mentor Stafford a little bit and be a guy that will help keep Stafford calm when the boat starts rocking. But I don't want Orlovsky maybe talking to Jake Rudock at all. So, in my opinion, if you want the Lions to be the best version of them they can be, I don't justify keeping Orlovsky on the team at all.
Yeah,
nothing personal. It's just he's not good enough.
That's hard, man, because like you said, you've got 53 spots that you have to fill, and we're sitting here talking about a logjam at running back and how you're going to possibly cut 2 or 3 guys who look like they're going to be either in the future have potential or could provide you some potential this season. So how do you sit there and you justify keeping them or cutting them when you're going to keep a guy who's not going to really do anything for you? And if he does get on the field, is he going to be a pick 6 machine? I mean, honestly, I can't stand watching Dan Orlovsky play anymore. It's not good. So I understand what you're saying, but going back to the point that you were making earlier, will Matt Stafford be healthy all season? And that's something I don't know because this offensive line is in flux right now. It's not consistent enough. So I think because of the offensive line, you have to keep 3 quarterbacks, because now what happens if Stafford goes down? He gets hit and he breaks a collarbone. All right, it's like Tony Romo all over.
You plug in Rudock, and then you sign a veteran that maybe gets cut in the final cuts.
But who are you going to sign? Who might be out there? Do you know what I'm saying? That's the big question. With a guy like Dan Orlovsky, he's already been in this system 2 years. He knows the deal. If you want to plug Rudock in, you've got a more than capable backup with Dan Orlovsky, who can back up. He'll be your 3rd quarterback, and I think we're all okay and comfortable with him being your 3rd quarterback. Look, if Stafford goes down, the season's done. We all agree that there is not enough talent in the quarterback rankings here to where it's going to make a sizable difference whether you keep Dan Orlovsky or Jake Rudock. I don't like necessarily keeping 3 quarterbacks when You've got guys that are talented at other positions that can fill a need and fill a role. That being said, I don't also like drafting long snappers, and there's questions on whether or not Jimmy Landis is going to beat out Don Muhlbach. And again, that's a wasted draft pick, So there's a lot about this team that I do like and a lot that I don't like. And as we get through Game 3 and get into Game 4 for the preseason, and as that final roster starts to kind of take shape and get molded out, it's going to be interesting to see who's winning these positions and who's going to be on that final 53-man roster, because I think that there's going to be a lot of talking points heading into the season. It's been a very quiet camp. Not a whole lot has come out. I mean, you had all the drama with Calvin Johnson going into the draft and coming out of the draft, and then you had your draft and everything was fine there. And now as preseason has rolled along, there's not been a whole bunch for us to talk about, like not a huge bit of hot points to sit there and touch on. I mean, we don't have a guy like Ndamukong Suh saying things or doing things anymore. None of these guys have come out. The one thing that we've always asked for is don't come out and say we're going to win championships. None of these guys have come out and said that we're going to win a championship this year.
Yeah, it's been relatively quiet, so definitely for sure. I know it's about that time where we say, okay, it's the preseason, it's game number 3. Now they're going to play the Baltimore Ravens. I just want to see the offensive line, defensive line do some things. I want to see Matthew Stafford control the offense and just get through the game with as minimal turnovers and the offense to look, relatively speaking, like a well-oiled machine. Definitely, if Amir Abdullah gets in there, if he's going to play at all, I want to see him, maybe get a couple yards, fall forward. I want to see how Theo Riddick and the running back how competition shakes out, and I definitely want to see how some of these wide receivers that we got on this team. I want to see how the guys slotted 2 through 6 are going to do behind Golden Tate, and you kind of see how the depth chart is going to shake out. And I'm just excited to see a little bit more of these guys. Maybe I think they're going to play at least a half, at least in preseason game 3. So I'll be excited to watch and peek in and see how the Lions look. But I'm starting to think that you basically have a polarizing force. What I'm thinking is, I think when the fans look at it, you got a polarizing effect right now with the Lions. You have the Lions, you have the fans that think they're going to be 500, and you got the fans that think they're going to suck. So it's really interesting to see which way it shakes out, because if you can get that first game versus Indy, it really sets the tone for a season that you could do some things. But like I said, I can understand why you would have some doubts with the Lions, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And going into this game against Baltimore, I'm kind of on the same page as you. I need to see that offensive line solidify a little bit more. I need you to at least
score touchdowns, baby.
Keep Stafford upright is what I really want. And again, score touchdowns. When you get into the red zone, I need some red zone production from the offense, whether that falls on the offensive line or whether that falls on the receivers and Matt Stafford or the running backs. I need Amir Abdullah to have a clean game. I don't want him putting the ball on the turf. It's something, again, it's hard for a running back to get on the field when he's spilling the pill everywhere. You just can't do it. Defensively, I'd like to see that back 7 tighten up a little bit. I'd like to see them make a few more plays. I think that defensive line is going to be very good. I think that's going to be the absolute strength of this team. Is what's yeah. That's right. Is that Jarvie? Thanks, Jarvie. I need to see that. I think that defensive line, you got me all flustered here and thrown off my game. I think that defensive line is going to be very good. And I think, honestly, that's going to be the one thing we can point to as the season rolls along, that we can say, man, that's good. It's too bad this or this or this or this is hurting this team, because that defensive line can go anywhere and play, and they're keeping us in games.
Go Lions! Yeah!
Get pumped. Yeah. Get excited.
Love Jarvie.
Oh, man, it's fun. Right now, the preseason has been fun, mostly fun for the Lions, in that it's light, it doesn't count for much. They're doing a good job of not letting out too much information. But September 11th is coming ever so close, and it's put up or shut up time. It's a big season for them, a big season for Matthew Stafford, a turning point, probably a watershed season for the organization as a whole, because if you're going to tie your organization for the next 10 years to Matthew Stafford, he better show you something, and that probably equates to a win in the postseason. And you just want to see that the guys that they tap to be on the 53, the final roster, on the final roster, that they actually show up and do what they're expected to do. I don't want to see Darius Slay getting torched by Luck in that first game, because, everyone has those natural doubts. The natural doubts are Andrew Luck's going to go down that first drive and torch Darius Slay. The natural doubt is Matthew Stafford's going to fumble the first drive.
Last time we've seen Andrew Luck, he did that to us.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely.
You want to be able to say, okay, the Lions are more aggressive and more are willing to impose their will on other teams instead of being reactionary. And so with a coach like Caldwell, it's a little bit different because he has to shake the conservative kind of moniker that he has, and he's got to do some things to improve. Maybe this in-game manager will actually work out, and they won't make too many late-game mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, they know all the rules this year so they don't lose in Seattle.
I don't know about that. You remember that Cincinnati Bengals game last week? They had, 12 guys on the defensive side of the ball?
You saw that, huh? Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. You sat there and you had the Bengals, you forced the Bengals to get off the field, and you were about to give your offense a shot and give them good field position. And you can't get your personnel right. It's like same old. So we'll see. Because your in-game specialty manager there didn't really do his job, and Jim Caldwell still having trouble counting to 11.
Oh my goodness! Great podcast, sir. Episode 159 in the books. Hopefully, the next week when we do 160, we get a lot of guests on talking about recapping preseason game 3, what our takeaways are, and really looking at objectively what these Lions can do. Because, again, the age-old debate is happening again on Facebook and Twitter. Are you a real fan if you have doubts about the Lions? Are you a real fan if you don't, go rah-rah, shish kumbah, talking about the Lions all the time when we know they haven't had success?
Go Lions! Yeah!
Can't be like that all the time. We're like that now. But once the season starts and we actually see the plays that they're executing and the way they're going to go about their business, got a feeling it's going to be a challenge all the way. And we'll see, because they have a light schedule. But can the Lions do the things they need to do to win? It's okay to have the self-doubt, because the Lions have shown they haven't been successful too often. So the doubt's there. Let's hope they can turn it around this year and prove everybody wrong.
Before we step away, what do you think is going to be a bigger factor for this team if they do have success, having success? The light schedule, like you said, or the things that they're doing in-game with their coaching staff and their players and the personnel they have on the field?
It's going to be the Lions. They're going to impose their will. They're going to use Abdullah. He's not going to fumble as much. Stafford's going to take over the team. Ziggy Ansah is going to emerge as a leader on this team. DeAndre Levy is going to get over whatever he's been bothered by. Jim Caldwell is going to emerge as Coach of the Year candidate. And, Jim Bob Cooter is going to actually run an offense that's going to be productive year in, year out. Golden Tate's going to be the top 5 receiver in all the NFL. And you're going to see Taylor Decker emerge and just say that the preseason was just a wash. He's going to come out there and smash people, and we're going to have a top 5 running game, and all the positives that you could hope for are probably going to come true this year.
Go Lions! Yeah! Wow.
You know that
there's a lot of sarcasm there.
That's the PR machine, baby. That's what you hope for.
You know who you sound like, right?
Who I sound like?
You sound like some girl who did a fan video on a Facebook page.
The person who decommitted, you mean?
I'm just saying, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's the positive side. But then you go, well, it could be a situation where Taylor Decker doesn't do his thing. Amir Abdullah continues to fumble the ball. The offense is in disarray. The defense gets hurt, and you lose games where you're ahead, and you look like the Lions of old.
Or you roll out 12 guys when only 11 should be on the field.
Or your kicker misses field goals when he was good last year. Special teams.
Special teams, yeah. Who's our long snapper? We don't know. We drafted a long snapper. Why? Because you're the Lions.
Yes, sir. All right, see everybody next week. Thank you for downloading across the various platforms. Tell somebody else if you like the podcast. Hey, there's these two fellas. There's a network of podcasts dedicated to Detroit sports. Not a lot of commercial breaks during our shows. Appreciate all the sponsors. Check us out. Tell us what you think. Visit our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, because I'll see you later.
Go Tigers.
Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head, they counsel me, they understand, they talk to me. They talk to me.